Welcome to Covered, the CTV and Rebuild Christchurch show that takes a behind-the-scenes look at the residential rebuild program in Canterbury. Today we'll be talking about cash settlements with Renee Walker from IAG and John Goddard from Community Law. We'll be finding out how insurer FMG has been dealing with settling insurance claims of our rural community, and Dion Swiggs from Rebuild Christchurch joins us for a talk about why he got behind the Covered TV series. Joining me now is Renee Walker and John Goddard. Thanks very much, Renee and John, for coming on in. Now, Renee, you're with IAG. What's your role with them?
So I'm the General Manager of Customer Solutions at IAG.
Right, okay, rather busy at the moment.
Yep.
And John, your role with Community Law?
My role is to be the supervising solicitor for all the staff who are working for the Residential Advisory Service.
Okay, yeah, so you've got to keep your eyes on quite a lot of issues going at the moment as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So I'd just like to talk to you about collectively with private insurers that have actually been cash settled. What about those that are trying to get cash settlements? How is that going from your perspective, Renee?
So for homeowners who are looking at cash settlements, so insurers really manage the overcap settlements and then settlements for things like paths, driveways, fences, and at the moment around 9,000 homeowners have opted for a cash settlement, whereas 2,500 roughly have opted for a managed repair and rebuild.
Okay, so are we still in that situation where if you do want to cash settle, you can with your insurer and you'll just get handed a cheque?
Definitely you can cash settle. It's not always just being handed a cheque, so there may be interested parties. If a homeowner is looking at a cash settlement as an option, what it does allow them to do is manage their own repair or rebuild or their own outcome, but what they would need to do is seek some advice from a bank probably if there was a mortgage on a property, or from a lawyer or someone independent, because it's not just a case of us handing them a cheque that they go off and do what they like with, particularly if there's a mortgage on the property.
Okay, so when a mortgage is involved, there are quite specific, proof of use of the money, or are you talking?
Well, the bank's going to be interested. Okay. So generally, a cash settlement would be paid against the mortgage. So like an EQC cap payment, for example, it doesn't just go to the homeowner, it will go against the mortgage if there is a mortgage there. And the bank will want to give some advice around the amount of equity in the home, what they can do with that money. It is generally required to repair or rebuild the property, so a bank will have an interest and want some involvement in that.
Right, okay. Yeah, so we're not disappearing off to Australia on a holiday, it's actually going into the home to fix the issues that it was settled for.
Yeah, it does give people the ability to manage their own outcome though. So for some people they will repair or rebuild the property, for others they might use it to purchase an existing property, they might use it to gain some equity in another one. So it does give the homeowner or the customer the power to be able to make those decisions.
Okay. How do you get to that final number? How is that decision decided and negotiated?
So I can talk mainly about the IAG process, but most insurers will follow something similar. So we would do an assessment of the property, we would look at what information we have on file, and then there'll be a number of times throughout the process that homeowners may like to look at a cash settlement. So for example, if geotech engineering has been done and structural engineering and there's been costs expended by the insurer, then those would probably come off a cash settlement. So if you're looking at a cash settlement at the start, some of those costs would be included because we'd be saying, well, we'll give you an allowance for those things. But generally an assessment will take place, we'll scope all of the damage, we'll price all of the damage, we'll generally have a builder involved in that. So the builder would say, yep, I can repair or rebuild this property for that amount of money, and then there'd be a negotiation with the homeowner. And everything is a negotiation. So I think people are a little bit wary that we'll give them a number and there's no conversation had, but there is always a conversation had with the homeowner because we want to make sure that they're comfortable, that we've scoped all of the damage and that what we're presenting to them is a fair and reasonable offer for their home.
Okay, okay. John, I would just like to ask you a little bit. I haven't asked Renee this about multi-unit buildings and these kinds of situations. How difficult does it become then with a cash settlement for these more complicated properties?
Well, sometimes with the more complicated properties, a cash settlement is a much simpler solution.
Right.
Because generally with a multi-unit building, you either have a cross-lease situation or you have a body corporate. And if you have one or two parties who are reluctant to proceed with a repair or a rebuild, then a cash settlement can be a way of working around that issue.
And then people within those multi-unit buildings, some of them can either, repair and rebuild or sell or do whatever, so everybody has their own choice. Is that sort of the idea?
Well, that can be the idea, but technically it can be quite complex. For example, if different owners share a firewall or share foundations or share a roof, and there are some quite firm guidelines around that which have been put out by MB, which basically say that if 50% or more of a building is going to be rebuilt, then the whole building has to be rebuilt.
Right.
Where that can be complicated.
What's MB?
MB is the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment.
Right, okay. So, sorry, could you repeat that for me then? So, when they're involved?
Well, they have put out guidelines which insurers and their engineers rely on when they're working out proposed solutions for repairs and rebuilds.
Right.
And there are specific guidelines for multi-unit buildings.
Okay. It's not straightforward, is it?
Not at all.
No. So is that where you become often involved from the community law point of view?
Absolutely.
Right.
It can be a situation where an insured is in dispute with their insurer or unsure about their entitlements, and so we can work to clarify what those are.
Okay. And then how is the cash actually paid out? I'm not sure which, does it, you mentioned before that some of it may go to the bank, to the mortgage. How do you feel with your clients with community law? What do you recommend people do? Do they have the power to get the cash in any other way?
It's very important to draw a distinction between cash settlements that come from EQC and cash settlements that come from private insurers.
Okay.
Certainly with private insurers, there is generally some quite comprehensive paperwork that needs to be signed and documented before payment will be made.
Okay. And at that point, you really do need your legal advice, don't you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But even in ensuring that a cash settlement is appropriate, because the cash settlement should be the equivalent cost of repairs or a rebuild. And so you need to look at the geotechnical information, engineering reports, perhaps look at quantity surveying so that you're sure that you've got your costs right. And one of the things that the Residential Advisory Service has is a technical panel, which is also part of the free service where people can go to just to check that those things are in place.
Right. Thank you very much for joining me. It sounds like it's actually a very complicated issue that really needs to be looked at case by case. And I think the bottom line is to get some good advice, isn't it? Yeah.
Definitely.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Renee and John, for your time today. I really appreciate it. Stay with us, because coming up after the break, we're having a chat to rural insurer FMG about what's been going on with settling their insurance claims.